Welcome to today's episode of the Simply Financial Podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Calandra. Want to increase your financial IQ with today's episode, which is a discussion about the trouble that the Social Security trust system finds itself today. So a little bit of history. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, President Roosevelt, signed the Social Security Act into law in August of 1935. The program actually began a few years later in 1940. As of today, some 55 million Americans receive payments from the Social Security system. The system is funded by payroll tax. It amounts to 12.4%. This 12.4%, though, is split evenly between the employer and the employee. So both parties pay 6.2% into the system up to a certain level. Let me point out that if you're self-employed, and if you're self-employed, you probably know this already, you are burdened by having to pay both sides of the equation. You pay, as a self-employed person, the entire 12.4%. You only pay this payroll tax up to a certain dollar amount. It's called the Social Security wage base. In 2023, that upper limit is $160,200. It goes up with inflation. So as an example, in 2022, it was $147,000. Then with the nasty inflation we had, it jumped all the way up to $160,200. And the reason for this Social Security wage base is you only can get so much out of the Social Security system in benefits. The system has a max benefit. In 2023, the maximum you can get, taking all the factors into consideration, is $4,555, and that is if you retire at age 70. So how this relates to the Social Security wage base is you're not charged the payroll tax above the $160,000 because at that point you have maxed out your Social Security benefits. The thing about this is when the system was designed all those years ago, it was specifically not to be a welfare program. It specifically was not going to be the same as other tax rates. You would pay into the system, but you would get out of the system. So that's the reason why you have the cap. So that's a quick, easy, simple explanation. So 90% of the money that's in the trust fund today is funded from these payroll taxes. And of course, the money is there then to provide income, not only to retirees, but the system also pays when somebody becomes disabled, or if a parent dies and has minor children, those children will receive Social Security payments. So it's a pretty broad program. The payments that you receive, the monthly payments, are also indexed to inflation, so they do go up over time. How much do Americans receive? The average benefit in 2023 is about $1,782 a month. That means about $21,400 a year. That's the average benefit. The estimate is that this Social Security program lifts about 15 million Americans out of poverty, meaning that if Social Security didn't exist, they would be under the poverty line. We could debate that because if you didn't have the taxes, people might have more money, so maybe they wouldn't be in poverty. But nonetheless, it's largely viewed as a successful program and has been for a very long time. So since the mid-1980s, a compromise was struck between the Republicans and the Democrats, and some elements of Social Security were reworked. This whole exercise was because at that time, there were financial stresses in the Social Security system. So they made a number of changes, increasing the retirement age and some other things to kind of buttress or strengthen the financial system. Boy, I screwed that up. But they made these changes to strengthen the retirement trust fund back then. The reason why Social Security is in trouble today is that cycle, what was done back in 1980s with a lot of vision and nonpartisan compromise, has kind of run its course. So Social Security is in trouble because it has built up since the 1980s. Every year, it has taken in more than it pays out. And at this point, it's built up a reserve of $2.8 trillion. That's trillion with a T, that it's built up. Now, this asset reserve, this surplus, is invested in U.S. Treasuries. The trouble comes in is that over the next stretch of time, this reserve is going to dwindle. The forecast from the Social Security trustees is that it'll be gone by 2033, which is only 9 or 10 years down the line. So all the work that was done over the last 40 years was successful, but it's coming to the end of its cycle. Additionally, I'll point out that the Social Security Board of Trustees came out with a report in 2023, and that report was grim. It indicated that between now and 2097, Social Security will be dealing with a $22.4 trillion shortfall. That is a staggering amount of money. So we have this reserve, and we're going to work off this reserve over the next 9 or 10 years. Beyond that, if nothing is done, we have this massive forecasted $22.4 trillion shortfall. Something will have to give. It'll have to be perhaps cut in benefits, or perhaps increase in retirement age, or some other formula, combination, whatever. But that, of course, is not sustainable. As of this recording, it is clear that the government is not tackling this. There is certainly a lack of leadership on both sides of the aisle regarding this topic. It makes sense, though, because if you're a leader and you want to get elected, this is a dangerous topic. Dangerous because Americans are probably going to be resistant to any change because, as you could tell from the numbers, there's not a lot of good or easy choices available to anyone. It's clear that Americans probably would resist increasing the retirement age, although that is an obvious solution or an obvious part of a solution. There's also the temptation to increase the payroll tax. There might be resistance to increasing taxes. There might be a movement to increase or do away with the Social Security wage base. In fact, President Biden has a proposal out there that calls for exactly that, to phase it out over a period of time. But that has its own set of problems because that would transition Social Security from what it was. You pay into the system and you get out. And at a certain point, when you max out your benefit, you're going to max out how much you put into the system. That would change that bargain significantly, making Social Security more like any of the other taxes we pay and make it start to look more like a welfare program. So there might be some acceptance of that. As I said, President Biden probably would do that if he had the power to. But that has significant challenges and problems associated with that too. Once again, there's no easy answers. President Biden's proposal is in the background. It's not a notable issue. It's not something that is being talked about on the Sunday talk shows. It's very much a minor background. In all likelihood, the government is going to kick this issue down the line or kick the can down the line. I'm curious to see if it becomes a presidential election issue, although I doubt it. As I said, it's a very difficult thing for politicians because the American people are probably not ready for notable change, the type of change that might be needed for Social Security to extend its life in a much healthier way than it is now, trying to repeat what was done under Ronald Reagan and the bipartisan agreements back then. As we begin to wrap up, let me point out a few of the demographic shifts that have caused Social Security to have this trouble. I take these from great research that was done by the Motley Fool, the online website. So number one, we have rising income inequality. You have a lot more Americans that are making a lot of money, and then a lot of Americans that are at the other end of the income spectrum. And studies show that back a few years ago, 91% of the earned income in the U.S. was subject to Social Security payroll tax, but that number is now dwindled to 81% because so much income is over the Social Security wage threshold, that $160,200. So a lot more income is escaping the payroll tax. So that's an issue. Number two is we've had in this country a 57% decline in legal immigration over the last 25 years. This highlights how dysfunctional the U.S.'s immigration policy is. You might know that we've had a massive amount of illegal immigration. I know that term in certain circles is disliked, to say the least. But it's crazy to me that we have seen such a decline in legal immigration. It seems like a very harmful policy, but this has happened over the last 25 years, so that has led to probably less money coming into the system. We have, number three, historically low U.S. birth rates, and that's really changing the generational demographic makeup of this country. Number four, we have increased longevity. Americans are living longer, and that has not been reflected in the Social Security system, and it wasn't accounted for back in the 1980s when this compromise was put into place. And then the fifth demographic shift that Motley Fool identified was the ongoing retirement of baby boomers. We have this large generation of baby boomers that continue to make their way into retirement. So for all of these reasons, Social Security is in trouble. I want to be clear, because you read some crazy stuff on the internet and elsewhere. I am not suggesting that Social Security is going to go bankrupt. It's not going to become insolvent, but it does have issues that will need to be addressed. I believe, though, in my opinion, they won't be addressed anytime soon. So you'll hopefully listen to this, feel more knowledgeable about the Social Security system and some of the problems that you might hear about, at least in passing in the public discourse. But I don't think this is something that will be addressed anytime soon. It's something I will be watching as the presidential election season gets more intense later on next year. But it is a big problem. Americans rely on Social Security. It's an important program, needs an overhaul, but I wouldn't expect much to happen anytime soon. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Simply Financial podcast. Please subscribe to the show if you haven't done so already, and check out the website for elliottwealth.com, www.elliottwealth.com. You could find more information about the financial planning role that me and the rest of the team here at the practice do to help our clients win with money. Thanks so much for listening today. I'll be back with you on the next episode of the Simply Financial podcast very soon.
The views expressed are not necessarily the opinion of SagePoint Financial Incorporated and should not be construed directly or indirectly as an offer to buy or sell any securities mentioned herein. Investing is subject to risks, including loss of principal invested. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. No strategy can assure a profit nor protect against loss. Please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information should be relied upon when coordinated with individual professional advice. Please note, the information being provided is strictly as a courtesy. When you link to any of the websites provided here, you are leaving this website. We make no representation as to the completeness or accuracy of the information provided at these websites, nor is the company liable for any direct or indirect technical or system issues or any consequences arising out of your access to your use of third-party technologies, websites, information, and programs made available through this website. When you access one of these websites, you are leaving our website and assume total responsibility and risk for your use of the websites you are linking to. Securities and advisory services are offered through SagePoint Financial Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC. Insurance services offered through Elliott Wealth Management, LLC, not affiliated with SagePoint Financial.